Charismatic leadership. Cults typically have a charismatic leader who claims to possess special knowledge and insight, or even a supreme divine connection. A cult leader must possess a magnetic and compelling personality in order to attract followers with their strange messaging. This requires the leader to give off the impression that he is devoted to the cause he promotes, and that he has unwavering loyalty and commitment to his followers. Charismatic leaders and cults love to use grandiose visionary thinking and messaging, promising their followers a better future, spiritual enlightenment, or some sort of personal transformation. They prefer speaking with vague ideas rather than direct facts, and they use outlandish statements that are poorly tied together to paint a bigger picture that is complete, calling for a rejection to normal life and discouraging any form of critical thinking or dissent. Criticism is not allowed within a cult, because the moment any of the followers start asking questions, that usually spells bad news for the leader. Leaders combat this problem by creating a strong us versus them dynamic within their cult, so that anytime the followers even think of criticizing or critiquing the leader, they are engaging in treasonous thinking and working for the enemy, meaning anything that they say can and will be discarded by the other followers as slanderous. It is important to note that charismatic leadership itself is not an inherently negative trait. However, in the context of a cult, these tactics that we just mentioned can easily be exploited and used for evil. Exclusive belief system. Cults often promote an exclusive and rigid belief system that distinguishes them from mainstream society. This exclusivity is a key part of how the cult stays alive, reinforcing a sense of uniqueness, superiority, and separation from those who do not share the same beliefs. A cult's belief system uses fear to discourage anyone from leaving. Any form of doubt or skepticism is seen as weakness and lack of faith, which is why cults discourage their followers from staying connected with their families or exposing really any outside information that could sow dissent within the hidden community. One example of a cult that fostered a hardcore but dangerous belief system was Heaven's Gate, where members believed in the existence of extraterrestrial beings and held the belief that they could achieve salvation by leaving their human bodies and ascending to a spacecraft trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. In 1997, 39 members died in a mass suicide as part of this belief. Another recent example is the Branch Davidians, who believed in an apocalyptic theology, a belief which led them to face a tragic confrontation with law enforcement in Waco, Texas in 1993, resulting in the deaths of many of its members. Manipulation and mind control. Manipulation and mind control are extremely common tactics used by cults to control its members, and leaders may employ various techniques to influence and micromanage the members' thoughts and beliefs in order to ensure compliance. As mentioned before, cults take an extreme measure to make sure their members are exposed to as little outside information as possible. This is due to the fact that exposure to more ideas will inevitably lead to questioning, and when members start asking questions, the problems within cult leadership multiply. Cults will often expose their members to confusing and contradictory information, causing psychological discomfort that encourages the individuals to resolve the inconsistency by accepting the cult's version of reality as their one true belief. Love bombing is another common cult-like tactic that they love to use, and this involves overwhelming new recruits with affection, attention, and positive reinforcement, which creates a sense of belonging and gratitude, making individuals more susceptible to influence. Cults like to keep their members sleep-deprived and working irregular schedules, subjecting them to exhausting physical activities so that they are typically more vulnerable and compliant at times. NXIVM, which was a self-help cult led by Keith Raniere, controlled its members by requiring them to provide personal information about themselves that was immediately used as blackmail to prevent members from leaving or exposing the group. Authoritarian structure. An authoritarian structure is characterized by enforcing strict obedience and having centralized decision-making within the cult. Under the leader, there is a hierarchical structure with layers of authority, including subordinate leaders or officials who enforce the leader's directives and maintain order within the group. Cults often have rigid rules and regulations governing the members' behavior and interactions, as limited autonomy is extremely important in order to maintain the cult's existence. These rules enforced by the leader or the higher-ups can dictate everything from dress codes to dietary restrictions and even personal relationships. Punishments for violating these rules can range from physical abuse, forced labor, public humiliation, financial exploitation, isolation from the group, and even outright excommunication. Conversely, rewards are also frequently given to members of a cult that are obedient. These rewards can range from something as simple as a false sense sense of belonging or emotional support, all the way to material rewards like luxury goods, money, and even special knowledge or information that lower tier members don't have access to, with varying degrees of usefulness. Cults may also offer practical benefits to its members, such as access to healthcare and housing within the group's community. Of course, these benefits usually come at a cost, one that is not apparently obvious to the brainwashed victims that are often deceived by these false acts of goodwill. Exploitation of members. Exploitation of the members within a cult takes form in the manipulation and misuse of individuals for the benefit of the group's leader and their agenda. The exploitation can take place in various forms, including financial, emotional, psychological, and physical exploitation. Financial exploitation can include giving 10% of your money each year to the cult, purchasing expensive materials and services, and even giving up your beloved personal belongings. Cults are typically non-transparent on how their funds are being used, and as long as nobody is brave enough to get suspicious and question anything, money continues to flow into it. Labor exploitation is another common tactic used by cults, as members are frequently required to work long hours with little or no pay. The Church of Scientology is one of these cults that is infamous for exploiting members' labor, making them sign billion-year contracts and having them suffer from extremely poor working conditions with no time off. Emotional exploitation within cults involves the aforementioned love bombing method, as well as gaslighting, which is the act of manipulating someone into doubting their own sanity, and guilt tripping, which keeps members emotionally dependent on the group. Psychological exploitation involves the cult process of reshaping and transforming the members' minds with reform, mind control, and indoctrination. Sexual exploitation is also unfortunately rampant in many cults, with dangerous power dynamic relationships existing from the higher-ranking members. Victims of these relationships, who are often minors, are coerced into abusive situations, and within the moment, many of them are so brainwashed they don't even realize the harm that is being enacted on them. The final form of exploitation is physical exploitation, and it takes place in the form of punishments and exposure to dangerous and unhealthy conditions, isolation from outsiders. You may have heard the term echo chamber before, which describes a community that is only exposed to information which reinforces its already existing views. Cults love creating echo chambers because isolation from the outside world is a perfect tactic for ensuring complete control and easy manipulation of its members. Cult leaders often require their members to cut off their friends and family. Some cults go a step farther and establish isolated communities and compounds where members live together. This physical isolation makes it difficult for members to leave or seek help, which serves multiple benefits to the leaders and can have profound psychological effects on the individuals. Usually, all cults outlaw any communication with anyone outside of the cult, labeling anyone who violates this rule as a dangerous or hostile person, painting a giant target on their back. If conversation is allowed in any form of phone calls, letters, and emails, it is usually heavily monitored, and even receiving this privilege requires special permission from group leaders. Fear and intimidation. Fear and intimidation in a cult can come in many forms with varying degrees of extremity. Cult leaders may use physical threats to keep their followers in line, which can be particularly effective if the group is isolated from the outside world, as members may feel that they have nowhere else to turn. Another way cult leaders use fear and intimidation is through emotional manipulation. For example, a cult leader might threaten to cut off a member from their family and friends if they leave the group. Shinrikyo is a perfect example of a cult that used fear tactics to control its users. Led by Shoko Asahara, it preached about an impending apocalyptic doom and convinced its followers that they were the chosen few who would survive. Members were subjected to intense indoctrination, psychological manipulation, and threats of punishment if they disobeyed the cult's orders. This culminated in the group's deadly sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway system in 1995. Groupthink. Groupthink in a cult occurs when members prioritize consensus and conformity over critical thinking and independent judgment. It's a psychological phenomenon where the desire for harmony or conformity in a group leads to an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. Cults create an environment where members feel pressured to conform to the group's norms and expectations, typically through peer influence and the fear of social rejection or punishment. Cults also give the illusion of unanimity, meaning that members may falsely believe that everyone agrees with the group's decision and beliefs, leading them to doubt their own concerns about what they are getting involved with. In a cult, members rationalize or justify the group's decisions and actions, even if they are irrational or harmful. Cults also appoint certain members as mind guards, whose role is to shield the group from dissenting opinions or information that could challenge the group's beliefs. Mind guards actively suppress dissent and promote conformity within the group. Deception and secrecy. Cults often use deceptive or misleading tactics to recruit new members. They may present themselves as harmless self-help groups, spiritual communities, or charitable organizations, hiding their true beliefs or intentions until individuals are deeply involved and it's too late. They present a sanitized and idealized version of their ideology to attract more followers, using misinformation, selective presentation of facts, and manipulation of emotions to reinforce loyalty to the group and its leaders. Cults then manipulate members' trust and loyalty to maintain secrecy and control. Unrealistic promises. Unrealistic promises in a cult refer to the extravagant or unattainable rewards and outcomes that leaders use to entice and manipulate members. These promises often play on individuals' desires for personal fulfillment, spiritual enlightenment, or societal change. Cults may promise members miraculous healing or transformation, claiming that adherence to the group's teachings or parties will cure physical ailments, mental illness, or even personal problems. Other cults promise members material prosperity, wealth, or success in exchange for their financial contributions or adherence to the group's teachings. Promises of world peace, social justice, or utopian society that can only come into reality through the acceptance of a cult's specific lines of beliefs is also not uncommon. Really, there is no limit to what cults are willing to promote to certain people, as long as their leader is effective enough at manipulating the vulnerable and delivering a message that sounds or feels good to the listener. Finally, there are certain cults that promise members with grandiose and absurd ideas of immortality and ascension to a higher plane of existence, claiming that adherence to the group's teachings or practices will practically turn them into gods. Certain types of promises and messaging appeal to certain types of people, but all of these types of promises usually lead to disappointment and even serious psychological harm and trauma when the members never experience the pleasures or goals they believe that they would receive or accomplish.